let's jump in with Ipswich Town because several reports say Kieran McKenna is one of the candidates being considered to be the new Celtic manager. It follows the resignation of Brendan Rodgers on Sunday. The likes of Ange Postecoglou and Craig Bellamy also being linked with the role. McKenna is contracted at Portman Road until 2028. What do we think to this, Justin? Could we realistically see this actually happening?
Strangely, I could see it happening. I think Celtic is a big job. I do think it's a big job. I know there'll be people who scoff at Scottish football. I know you will be adamant that Scottish football is below anything that England offers, football-wise. But I do think Celtic is a big job that can elevate you to bigger jobs, to bigger things. I think in the past Celtic has proved to be a trampoline for managers. Martin O'Neill went to Aston Villa. Brendan Rodgers went to Leicester shortly after they won the Premier League. He was obviously repairing his reputation post Liverpool. Big Ange went to Spurs. I think you've got the potential to win titles, which is an attractive proposition for any manager. Nice to have on your CV. But also you've got access to European football, which again I think can really help you refine yourself as a head coach, as a manager, as a tactician in the highest level possible.
Okay. Let me bite back on that because I think, well, first of all, what I've been seeing from Ipswich fans online is that apparently McKenna's family are Celtic fans. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but that's what I've been seeing online. For me, it would be a bizarre career move because going from Ipswich to Celtic is at best a sideways step in my eyes. I get, everything you're saying there. Celtic are a massive club and everything. European football, great, but then what? You win the Scottish Premiership a few times. Yeah, great. It's not exactly much of an achievement for Celtic considering who they're up against, and they've done it millions of times in recent years. I would say it's a bigger achievement getting promoted from the Championship, even if you have spent as much money as Ipswich have in this past summer. I know he's obviously not having the greatest of times at Ipswich right now, but I would still say currently that Ipswich are still going to go up, if I'm getting my prediction hat on. And then if that happens, McKenna gets another crack at the Premier League. And then if that doesn't work, then he goes and gets a job, which is an actual upgrade on Ipswich. Because I don't think Celtic is. Yes, big club and everything. But in terms of the grand scheme of Kieran McKenna's career, it would be very much a sideways step. Because the ultimate goal for him is to be managing at the highest level possible. I struggle to see how moving Celtic improves the chances of that happening, despite the managers you mentioned before, like Ange and Brendan Rodgers and what have you. There's plenty of examples of managers who have gone from the Championship and also been managing at the Premier League and done very well there. And I think Kieran McKenna will happily take that pathway as well.
But I think that route's a lot more difficult and a lot rarer as well, because we don't see a lot of Premier League clubs dipping into Championship managers and going for them. It's not as regular as it once was. For example, we speculated that Brentford could have been one of those clubs that McKenna ended up at because obviously Thomas Frank left, but then they went to the internal route. I think there's an element of just needing to look outside the Premier League Championship sphere a little bit and look at sometimes you've got to go sideways to go up. You've got to make that sideways step because I think that access to European football is such a big thing. And as well as that, Celtic or Rangers in this instance, they're big clubs. It's a pressure cooker of expectation. So if you don't win, you get vilified, as we've seen with Russell Martin.
But to bounce back on that then, could that be a reason why he shouldn't move? Because then it's very easy. It's a lot easier for things to go wrong and his stock to take a real bruising than it is to slightly improve it by meeting expectations at Celtic.
But if you can handle that expectation and thrive under it, I think that adds elements to your managerial game as well. Because I think as a manager, something that gets overlooked, this is something that Graham Potter failed to do at West Ham, is you've got to manage every single stakeholder involved in the football club that you manage, the players, the staff, the owners, the fans. Graham Potter struggled to do that. So if you can go to a Celtic or Rangers, get the fans on side. That I think that's an element that is important if you're going to become an elite manager. And unfortunately, because Scottish football is Scottish football, if it wasn't, Celtic or Rangers would be huge football clubs. But the league that they play in is just not big enough. But that's why you always measure one of those managers by how well they do in European competition. And that's why I think a sideways step in this instance would be a positive for Kieran McKenna. whether or not it's positive for Ipswich. It would take a record compensation fee for a Scottish club to bring him into Celtic, by the way, which goes to show just how highly rated he is. But there's a lot of factors there I think that get overlooked quite easily, which is, I don't think it should be the case.
I don't know, because, well, you mentioned how important performing in European football is, but I don't think... I mean, who was the last Celtic manager to do anything on the European stage? It's been a while since they did anything significant, because most times they're either failing to qualify for the group stages of the Champions League, or group stage, whatever it's called nowadays, and getting absolutely panned if they do make it into the group stage. Do you know what I mean? So I don't see... And to go back to your other point about how it's rare for managers to go from the Championship to the Premier League, I'm not sure it actually is. I mean, Kieran McKenna last time when he got promoted with Ipswich was being linked with all sorts of jobs, and it was looking at one stage quite unlikely that he was going to be staying at Ipswich. So I think getting promoted from the Championship is a much bigger deal and much bigger achievement than it is just winning the title every season with Celtic, because ultimately you're a failure if you don't win the title with Celtic. That's the main thing here, and that's why I just think it's a sideways step for someone like Kieran McKenna in the position that he's in. But we should talk about what this could mean for Ipswich if he were to go, Justin, because as we were saying earlier in the summer when there was speculation about his future at the time, it would be a serious blow for Ipswich, even though, of course, they're not doing very well as things stand.
Well, there'll be quids in. As I say, it'll be upwards of £5 million to bring him in. What does it mean for Ipswich? I think Ipswich are in a very healthy position. I think they're in a really healthy position. Again, when we were speculating about the Brentford news, or the potential of him going to Brentford, I mentioned Michael Carrick being a good option. I still think that's the case, but could Ipswich look beyond Michael Carrick? Potentially, because they're well backed. They've got a squad packed full of talent. There's good resource there, and they are one of the favourites to be playing Premier League football next season. Whether or not they're 12th at the moment, that could change. A lot of football to be played this season. So I think losing Kieran McKenna will be an emotional blow, but he's elevated the club massively, probably more than what many would have expected, because obviously getting back-to-back promotions has put them in a position that they've not been in since the early 2000s, i.e. the Premier League. So he's put them in a stratosphere, and I think it'd be one of those where it'll be sad, it'll be disappointing, but Ipswich are in a really good place. I wouldn't say to upgrade, because I don't think that's particularly fair on Kieran McKenna, but they're in a very, very healthy position. Yeah,
I think losing Kieran McKenna will be a massive blow because of all the reasons you say there, and he's obviously a very talented coach, and I don't think we should look at these first 11, 12 games and really hold that against him too much, because there's been a lot of gelling with new players to come in, and ultimately I still think Ipswich will go up if you were to ask me right now. As far as who would come in from McKenna, I think that's really difficult to say. I look at someone like Carrick, and while I can see the similarities and why you would suggest someone like him, I think Ipswich would be surely looking for someone higher up the food chain than him, because after all, it didn't go particularly well for him in the last couple of seasons at Middlesbrough. But whether Ipswich, my confidence on Ipswich getting that appointment right has been somewhat hindered by their business they did in the summer, because while they did make some good signings, I did find a lot of the business they did to be a bit strange. So say 12 months ago, when he was being linked with various jobs in the Premier League after just getting them promoted, I would have probably backed them at the time to replace him and do a good job of that. Now I'm not so sure. So it would be interesting to see what would happen if that were to come around. It's got to be said. Here's a quick question for you, Justin. Could we see Brendan Rodgers in the Championship? Now, it's worth saying whether his ego would allow him to drop down to the Championship is another question, but I'm not sure Premier League clubs will be as interested in him now as they once were. So could the second tier be next on his radar, perhaps?
I want to see him in the Championship.
He was in the Championship once upon a time, wasn't he? Everyone kind of forgets about that with Watford and Swansea.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a 12, 13 years ago. That was a long time ago now. A lot of time has has passed and some championships evolved since then. So whether or not actually Brendan Rodgers and his football could adapt to championship is an interesting debate as well. I know people will say, well, he's Brendan Rodgers, it will work. Not necessarily the case. He's just a bit odd, isn't he? That's why I want to see him in the championship. Did you see the statement Celtic put out on him, by the way?
I haven't. Please inform me.
I'm not going to read it out in full because it's long, but there's some incendiary stuff in there, right? Like flamethrower of a statement. The Dermot Drummond was I can't remember his role at Celtic, but he used phrases like the facts did not match his public narrative. He created a toxic atmosphere and fueled hostility. So
not great.
Not great, and that's ultimately why he's resigned. But to be honest, I could see him go to the Middle East. I think his time's done over here. I really do.
Maybe. It wouldn't surprise me if that happens because, he, as you say, he has got a reputation for having a bit of an ego about him, hasn't he? So
Gucci belt.
I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if he came down to the Championship. He's apparently got a portrait of himself in his own house, hasn't he? A big portrait. Have you seen that?
Don't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Justin Peach is such a big fan of Scottish football. 5 in 10. Name 5 Scottish football teams that aren't Celtic or Rangers.
Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, Queen of the South, and an Athletic.
Good stuff. Good stuff. When you got past Aberdeen, I was like, right, where's he going next with that?
Yeah, Dundee United would have been an easy one as well.
Let's get back onto Championship matters because it's all go at Sheffield Wednesday, Justin, after they were put into administration last week. The joint administrators say they have 4 or 5 serious bidders interested in the club. Speaking to the BBC, Chris Wigfield said Wednesday could have new owners by the end of the year and is hoping the new owners are in place to sign players in the January transfer window. That would be an extremely quick turnaround, Justin, but would be brilliant if it did indeed happen.
It would be brilliant. Let's get that out there. It would be brilliant. Is it realistic? I don't know. I don't think it is. I think administrators have said these things will take time. And there, of course, has to be due diligence, which is annoying, which ultimately gets in the way of all of this. Side note, non-refundable deposits, I think, would bring forwards timescales because you get the serious parties, but that's a debate for another day. But we heard this with Derby. With administrators with Derby, they said it'll be done by Christmas, carried on till May, June. I'm not necessarily saying that's the case. I think the administrators have got cause to be optimistic, and I think pushing that positive narrative out onto the supporters and in the media is absolutely fine. We know there's always been interest in Sheffield Wednesday anyway. We know that's been the case. It's always been there. There's been interest for a long time. Just one person stood in the way of that, and his name rhymes with Shmeifon Shmanshmiri.
Nearly rhymes with that. I think you made a bit of a hash of it towards the end there. But yeah, I think whether it's realistic or not, I don't know. Because, as you say, it was a bit of a mess with Derby a few years ago, but I think that may have been an exceptional circumstance, which we won't get into right now. I think let's make it very clear, first of all, we're not saying Wednesday could stay up this season. When you keep in mind they're on -6 points already and still have another points deduction on the way, it's not happening. But what it does mean is if a takeover does happen in the next couple of months, they can be competitive for the remainder of the season. And perhaps most importantly, start preparing for next season and give Wednesday fans a bit of hope, which they desperately have been lacking for a while now. Obviously, the actual most important thing is getting Chansiri out of the club, but that's now going to happen at some point anyway. So if this can all be done before the January window, then that's great. Particularly because administration can be a very expensive process if you're stuck in it for a while, as we found out with Derby. My only concern is, even though he's effectively not running the club anymore, nothing's ever simple when Chansiri is involved, is it? So getting all this done in 2 months is a great target, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to pin all my hopes on that happening. Do you see what I mean, Justin?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's important for them to manage expectations whilst being positive. I think the optimistic view is, we'll get it done by the new year. We want new players and we'll get it done by the new year. Realistically, it's probably not going to happen. You are right, again, to bring up the point that nothing's ever simple with Stefan Chansiri around. Is he going to go quietly into the night? I don't I don't think so. I always feel like there's something lurking in the background, isn't there? But as I say, I think being optimistic, having interested parties, that's an important step, because you don't want to be, as an administrator, ringing around saying, "Do you want to buy this club we're currently managing? Do you want this?" People have approached them. That's a positive. That's the thing you've got to take forward out of this.
Yeah. By the way, while we're talking about Chansiri, did you see that? According to the Sheffield MP Clive Betts, Chansiri contacted the Mayor of Sheffield to see if he could help make his tax bill go away. I think what's happened here is, because a mayor in England is a lot different to a mayor in other countries, isn't it? Like a mayor in America, for example, actually has a lot of power, where a mayor in England doesn't really, do they? They have very minimal power, but Chansiri clearly thought this is the man to go to make something like this go away.
I'm trying to actually find words, because the immediate route for me is ridicule him, absolutely ridicule him. But actually, what Chansiri's done here is made me question why are they there? Why do we have a mayor of our town or city?
I think it's more like a ceremonial thing, isn't it? Someone to maybe doing a complete and utter disservice to the great mayors of Britain. But I think it's more just to, cut ribbons and show up at events, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I just hope that my council tax is not being wasted here, and they're not being paid an extortionate amount of money, because I genuinely thought all they did was just dictate whether you have to pay for your garden waste bin.
Yeah. I mean, you always go on about how much of your tax is being wasted. That's why you're supporting Doge, isn't it? But I don't know. I don't know how much mayors get paid, what have you. But I think the bottom line here is just, in one day, we're going to have a good look back at some of the mad things Chansiri has done over the years and have a good laugh, aren't we? Because
this is one of the most logical, though, isn't it? Let's be honest.
By his standards, maybe. Because when all is said and done, and Wednesday actually have a sensible owner, we can just sit back and say, "Oh, God, that was very silly, wasn't it?" Well, according to The Telegraph, one of those interested in Wednesday is US billionaire John McAvoy. He's an investor in things like baseball, ice hockey, and music. Interestingly, he has a stake in the talent company Various Artists. They represent Reverend and the Makers, whose lead singer is massive Wednesday fan John McClure. And he's said to have been consulted by McAvoy about a takeover. And you like a bit of Reverend and the Makers, don't you, Justin?
Yeah, I'm surprised you don't, actually. We did a bit of an Easter egg here. We interviewed John McClure in lockdown, but we never released it. It was a good chat. It was a very good chat. I interviewed him. You didn't bother turning up. No, I just had a chat with him.
Can't remember this at all.
It's when we were scrambling around for content during lockdown. But no, John McClure is very, very nice. Very, very nice human being. Very nice guy. Very passionate Wednesday fan. Dislike Chansiri a lot. He's really embedded into Sheffield as well. So I genuinely don't think there's a better link there for someone who loves a football club as much as him. Obviously, they need serious bidders. But if you know someone who's a Wednesday fan, then Wednesday needs to be brokered. Why not? Go for it.
What songs have Reverend and the Makers done?
Heavyweight champion of the world.
How's that one going?
I'm not going to sing it.
Why not?
I don't want to.
Is that the one that goes, "I could be a contender, I could have been someone"?
Careful, in case we get copyrighted on YouTube. We need to
good point.
Monetize this video. Be careful.
Because I sound so similar
to
John McClure. I'm not sure if anyone outside of Britain will be able to recognise that.
John McAvoy can.
There you go. John McAvoy knows. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Another bidder for Wednesday could be John Textor. The former Crystal Palace co-owner has publicly expressed an interest in the Owls in the past. The Athletic say he's alternatively looking at investing in one of Charlton, Derby, QPR or Watford. So whoever it is, John Textor almost certainly looks like he's going to be involved in the Championship in some shape or form in the near future, Justin.
Nice little dig there at Wolves. Context being he's had a bid rejected for Wolves very recently, who could be playing Championship, or more than likely will be playing in the Championship next season.
That's a good point. That's a very fair point. I didn't include Wolves because that bid has been rejected and plus not in the Championship right now. But it is worth mentioning our friend Andy Brassel from Stack's European Football Show on the continent does not have many positive things to say about John Textor, does he? So whether it's a full-blown takeover he's looking for or a percentage of the club, it's interesting that he's looking at those particular clubs, shall we say.
Yeah, he's not going away, is he? And that worries me a little bit. And I'm not a big fan of him. He's disliked at most of his clubs. I can't say whether he's disliked at Botafogo or RWDM Brussels in Belgium.
So you mean he's one other club, being Leon?
Leon, yeah. Well, no, he was very disliked at Palace as well. But
yeah, of course. I believe he is liked at Botafogo. I think he was being paraded around on the pitch before they won the Brazilian title,
or he was on the pitch before they won the Brazilian title as the owner. But for example, he turned up to a Leon Presser wearing a Botafogo cap, which fans were not a big fan of. If you're Leon, he's brash. He's a bit annoying. I would implore clubs to ignore him now because he's hung around. He's not done anything. He's not actually gone, yeah, okay, I'll invest in this club. What's he doing? He's just hanging around.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to see where he turns up because you say you'd implore clubs to turn away once he starts flashing the big bucks in front of them. I don't think Championship clubs are ever going to turn that down, are they? May I take this opportunity to point everyone in the direction of the latest video on the Second Tier YouTube channel. It's all about Will Still. And I asked the big question, is he going to be an elite manager in the future or is he just a meme? I also have a look at Southampton's recent struggles and decide whether they should stick with him or change now to save their season. What do you think the Southampton hierarchy should do this season, Peachy?
I don't know. You made great points, and there's a lot I agree with, and we discussed it at length at the weekend. There's a lot of points I agree with you there. I think the board themselves need to take accountability for some of the awful recruitment decisions they've made. But you talk a lot about the data, and yes, the data does back up the fact that Will Still's performances as coach, he's been let down by players. That being said, I don't think there are a lot of intangibles you didn't discuss, mainly because you can't measure them. But there's squad management, there's game management, there's man management, which I know you do mention, but I feel like he's lacking in all of those elements at the moment, which I'm not surprised because he's just a baby in managerial sense, isn't he? He's just a wee baby.
He's a big baby.
He's just a big baby. That's actually quite mean. He's learning the ropes, isn't he? But Southampton need those intangibles that I mentioned, as opposed to a good coach who can play nice football. Because he's not getting results; they need results. But I think they stick with him. But sooner or later, someone's going to crack. Ryan.
We shall see. Southampton have got Preston at home this weekend, which is a big game for Will Still. He's getting towards must win at the stage, isn't it? Another manager who definitely knows the term must win right now is Liam Manning. And that's because Sky Sports say Norwich are expected to continue to stick with him as manager for now. Emphasis on the for now. It comes as the club's American owner Mark Atanasio has flown in for face-to-face talks with Manning, as well as the club's sporting director Ben Napper. Meanwhile, Manning has said he isn't worried about the threat of relegation with Norwich. He said, "My energy is going into winning games. That's the biggest bit for me. Forget the end of the season. It's so far away still. What we can't do is focus there and keep letting games drift by us. I think that's the biggest bit. We have to change where we are, and that starts with the next game." Justin Peach, are you worried about the threat of relegation for Norwich?
Yes.
Good. Glad we got that sorted.
Blind optimism exists, and that was that, wasn't it? Like, if you're not looking at May and going, we won't get relegated, no way. We're not in danger, no way. Just because you're several months away from the end of the season, that doesn't mean a thing, unfortunately. I want to try and be positive about Norwich, but it's just hard to find the good things about the club at the moment. The good things about the club when things are bad was Delia Smith, because it's Delia Smith. You can't say a bad word about Delia Smith, but now she's out the picture. It just feels like the club's making bad decision after bad decision, and no one's shaking them and going, "You're making a bad decision." No one's doing that. Obviously, they're not going to listen to supporters or content creators, are they? But at the end of the day, everyone's saying the same thing, and everyone's saying the right thing, which is the club's spiralling, and no one's got control of it, not even the owners, and that's a worry.
Yeah, there does seem to be a bit of a lack of urgency around the situation right now, doesn't there? And if anyone is saying, well, surely Norwich are too good to go down, may I point everyone to Luton last season, because that idea of someone being too good to go down has well and truly been thrown out the window after what we saw in the last campaign. I think Norwich are a bit fortunate, really, that Sheffield Wednesday are going to be taking one of those relegation spots, because if you ask me, are there two other teams worse than Norwich? Then, yeah, I definitely think there is. If Wednesday weren't there, then I think that would leave the door open for someone like a Norwich to be in serious danger of going down, because Norwich shouldn't go down. The squad should still be doing a lot better than it is, despite all the criticism we've put towards it about it having seriously regressed in the last couple of years, and a lot of money has been spent on it as well, which means it shouldn't really be in the position that it's in. But you look at Norwich's recent performances, they've been getting worse, haven't they? Mm-hmm. And that's why it's becoming increasingly hard to defend Liam Manning. You know what I mean?
I'm glad you brought that up. Going back to our conversation with Johannes Hoththorpe back in the summer, you asked him a question about them potentially being a one-man team with boy signs rescuing them, and his response was, well, good teams will build around their best players, and they'll put their best players in positions where they're going to create, they're going to score. And you can take a lot away from that, and I know it's just a very normal managerial response, you'd imagine, but Liam Manning isn't doing that. A lot of the positives, a lot of the reasons why Josh Sargent was getting in behind opposition last season was because Kenny McLean was playing some really good balls over the top for him. It was almost rinse and repeat at times. But they're not doing that now. It feels like Liam Manning's dropped into a system, and that system's not working. Because it's not even a Southampton situation with Norwich, is it? They're not beating sides on shot count or keeping opposition out. They're keeping the ball, but they're very blunt, they're poor, and it's a new squad that's struggling. So, yeah, other than Sheffield Wednesday, for the obvious reasons, I think Norwich are the most precarious club going at the moment. They really are. Yeah,
you talk about Sargent there. He's now without a goal in 8 games, and I'm just looking at his underlying data. He's not even getting in positions to score, which is the really worrying thing, isn't it? Because if you give him chances, he usually puts it away. But the fact he's not even getting in those positions is perhaps more worrying than anything, isn't it? A club we surprisingly haven't spoken about in a while is Wrexham. They were knocked out of the League Cup on Tuesday to their Welsh rivals Cardiff. And the Daily Mail has done a big piece on them this week, Justin, where it said, sources have described the atmosphere in the first team in recent weeks as a pressure cooker for the players. It's because of the high outside expectations for them, with Wrexham currently sat 16th. And that got me thinking about the expectations for Wrexham, because I think that's an interesting one. Yes, it's a newly promoted side, but we all know this isn't your ordinary newly promoted side, is it? And this past summer, they spent the most in a transfer window in Championship history for a side who weren't in the Premier League the previous season. So with that being said, Justin, what do you think their expectations are now after 12 games of the season? Have they changed at all?
It has to be to consolidate, doesn't it? If they're looking any further than mid-table, saying we can get into the playoffs, I think there's an air of delusion, and I think your new players that have come in will probably identify that. But as I say, it has to be to consolidate, and I think you're mad if you're suggesting you're going to compete for the playoffs, especially if that message is coming from the top into the players. Because I did read an article that the owners do drop WhatsApps to the players, which again I think makes me a little bit uncomfortable, especially at this level. Just don't think it quite works the same way. Whoever you are, whether you're Ryan Reynolds or Dave Chansiri. But I think they're getting to a point where player availability is becoming an issue as well. They're getting a couple of knocks, a couple of injuries, and that's going to impact things. And I think that is impacting things. They're dropping too many points from leading positions, which is a very important thing to note. So there's game management being an issue, and also the players that are coming on in games aren't quite good enough. So, yeah, I think expectations has to change. Have they changed? I don't think they have, because I've seen some Wrexham supporters suggest on social media that the players are no longer playing for Phil Parkinson, which I think is an overreaction. But this is actually the first time Wrexham have been up against it, and it's clear there's sections of fans who are used to success and want success.
Yeah, I've also seen Wrexham fans not exactly turning against Phil Parkinson, but airing a lot more frustration than I'd previously seen in the past. And, so often we've had Wrexham fans defend Parkinson, haven't we, whenever we've been critical of him. But I imagine for them it might be a bit odd when you've been used to your side challenging for promotion for the past 4 seasons straight, and now they're just 16th. Do you know what I mean? Perhaps in a way, Parkinson is a victim of his own success, and as far as what their expectations are, it is really hard to say. I think the squad that came up would have been bottom 3 in the Championship in my eyes. It was a weak squad, which was surprising considering the amount of money that had been spent on it previously. But I think the money they've spent this past summer and the standard of player they brought in means it's justifiable for people to say they should be looking at the playoffs. I don't think it's delusional at all based off what you were saying. I think it is interesting looking at the underlying data because that actually puts Wrexham a bit lower than 16th in the table. So, to be honest, I don't think my stance has changed too much on them, with the main thing being the higher they finish in the table this season could depend on how long they keep hold of Phil Parkinson. That's the thing I was saying a lot towards the start of the season, because we are now 12 games in, and I can't say I've exactly been overwhelmed with evidence that he's capable of delivering Wrexham's ultimate aim, which is to get promoted, Justin.
Well, this is it. They've tightened things up a little bit, but they started to draw a lot of games, didn't they? And ultimately, they've become a little bit more blunt going forwards. And they were big chance creators at the start of the season, but also very, very wasteful. So there's an element of, okay, well, Phil Parkinson's deploying a side of play that is creating, but it's also conceding at the back. But actually, is player quality now going to become an issue? So have they invested in the right players, right individuals? Kiefer Moore's not scored for a fairly long time in the league. That's a problem. He's missing chances as well. I know Nathan Broadhead's come in and he's starting to put them in the back of the net, but it's not all coming in at the right time, is it? So there's a lot of variables with Wrexham that we're not used to as pundits of the Championship dealing with because of all this outside noise that exists with Wrexham. And I think that's what it is. It might not be expectation, but it's certainly a lot more noise surrounding Wrexham than there are other clubs, which is an interesting thing to observe.
We will be talking more about Wrexham tomorrow because we're doing another live reaction straight after their game on Friday night at home to league leaders Coventry. So make sure you join us then for that. But otherwise, that's just about time for us here on the Second Tier podcast. We'll be back again tomorrow with the preview show where we'll be looking ahead to the weekend's action across the Championship. So we look forward to seeing you then for that. But otherwise, this has been the Second Tier podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.